a lot of investing, to kind of touch on what you've done, is personal and individual. You did what you felt was best for you, and that's what made you comfortable. And you always need to be in line with what we call our sleeping level. And for you, you were uncomfortable. You felt like, hey, I've made a lot of money. I'm anxious about what's going on now. Had you stayed invested, you'd still be thinking about it. You'd still be anxious about it. So I think you made a good move because you stopped yourself from being an emotional investor.
And it is a pleasure to have a chat with you today. I want to talk about money because that's something that you're pretty passionate about. Welcome to Rock Your Money, Rock Your Life podcast.
Hey, Rock. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
So ironically, as we were talking before, we are actually about 2 or 3 good drives. I don't know if you play golf, but 2 or 3 drives from each other physically as you're in town.
Yeah.
Both at the foothills of Camelback Mountain. So how are you enjoying the heat?
Oh, I love the heat. I need it. I'm like a lizard. I can lay out in the sun all day long and not get overheated. So I'm loving it.
Yeah, people say to me, why do you move to Phoenix? And I go, why not? I love everything about it. You know, open air, it's bright, it's sunny almost every day. People are cool. You can exercise, you can hike, you can bike, you can swim, you can golf, you can do it all.
Well, unless you're from a cold place like you and I originally, you don't fully appreciate the sun and the desert and the heat and everything. So you ended up in Scottsdale, I ended up in Miami Beach, and it's been great.
Yeah, 100%. So let's talk a little bit about money.
Sure.
About 97% of the population struggle with money. They struggle and I'll frame it to you this way. I look at the cash flow quadrants, Robert Kiyosaki's cash flow quadrants, and I go, we have an identity in each of the quadrants. So as an employee, you have a way, you show up early, stay late, or you try to cut corners, whatever the case may be, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then you have, if you go out and become an independent contractor, you're like an insurance salesperson or a realtor or what have you, you have self-discipline or a lack of it, and you struggle or you do really well. And then you go over and you become a business person and you can build a team and you can hire and you can train and you get really good at that and you can scale and you can have some freedom. And then ultimately you can become an investor. My particular story, Briton, was I was good at the first 3 and I poured all my money into investor quadrant. And I took advice from all the people that I grew up with. Mm-hmm. And guess how that turned out?
I mean, I can guess. I'm going to guess not very well.
Not so good. So in the last decade, I learned that I really needed to take my investment advice from people that were miles down the road, worth $100 million or more. And that's turned out really well for me. And so let's talk a little bit about, the money personality that you've created and what you've experienced out there.
Sure. So Rock, for me, my biggest skill has always been the investing aspect. I've been really good at it. I'm a very strong analyst. I'd like to say I'm pretty patient, even though I could always be more patient. But for me, I was always good at investing, and my strength came from that. I started out really young, grew up in a poor family. And I remember even at 7 years old, hearing my parents talk about money and kind of feeling stressed about money as a little kid. So what I ended up doing is I started working for my neighbors. I got little odd jobs around the house, and I did everything I possibly could to save and make my own money. And it was one of those things where I was at the right place at the right time, because this was 2002. And I walked in the house one day and I saw my dad had some silver coins laid out. And to a 7-year-old, that looks like pirate's treasure. So I wanted it. And he said, for $4 or $5, we could go buy you some. And I had, at this point, a couple $100 saved for my job. So I said, great, let's go. And I just started buying them. And he took me to the coin shop down the street. I continued this process of working and buying silver coins for years, all the way up until I was 16 years old, which was 2011. And silver had gone from $3 or $4 an ounce to 49 by this point in time. And I had a few thousand ounces of this stuff by then. And he handed me an investing newsletter, and he said, this guy started with precious metals when he was 16. You've got a lot of precious metals yourself at 16 years old. So see what you think. Started reading it, read it religiously. And the writer of this newsletter wrote about the silver peak in April of 2011. He said, time to sell all your silver. So I ended up cashing out at $46 an ounce. And then rolled that into medical device companies. And after a few years in the medical device companies, by the time I was in my early 20s, I was financially sufficient, and that's how I made my wealth, and just continued to grow that. And now we run a wealth management firm helping other people do the same. But investing has always been my strength. Even though I'm now an entrepreneur, having started a wealth management firm, it all stems from the final process, step of the process of being a strong investor.
So let me break that down, because there's a couple of things here that I think are important. First, give me your definition on financially sufficient.
Financially sufficient. I think what you need to do is have your lifestyle in mind. And for me, in my early 20s, I was living a pretty minimal lifestyle where I looked at it. I looked how much I had. I looked at how much I had. I looked at how much I would earn if my compounding kept going. And I was at a point where, if I could never work a job right now and I lost everything, I would be able to support my current lifestyle indefinitely, which at the time, it wasn't a super glamorous lifestyle, but at least I knew, hey, if I can't work or if something happens, I can stay home. I can live in a modest apartment. I can just read books or play video games or, spend time with my family, whatever I want to do for the rest of my life. And then as I continued to work and to earn and to invest, my lifestyle I was able to increase my lifestyle while still being able to do it forever, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. So the term I use is financial security for that first level. Mm-hmm. So I think it's the same thing. And so are you saying that your passive income was sufficient to cover for your basic needs?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So that's the first level I try to help people get to. I'd love for your comment on this. Is, to me, I try to keep things super simple. So I say, if you want to become wealthy, and part of this comes from The Richest Man in Babylon, but increase what you earn. That's a thing you can control by developing your skill set or working harder, or putting in more hours, right?
Yep.
Decrease your burn, which is, a modest apartment, a modest vehicle. You don't need to have Gucci this and Prada that. Right? You could, but you don't need to.
Right.
And that gap creates money that most people are conditioned to consume. They're consumers. But a guy like you, from a very young age, I can't believe you had $200 at the age of seven, but that's pretty impressive. You took that money and you chose to invest it.
Yes.
And then there becomes the managing of that and the skill of investing. So first of all, I want to ask you is, what was it that, like, your parents arguing over money, the feeling that, try to think back, what was the genesis of you not being a consumer, but being an investor?
For me at that time, it was fear, but also almost a little bit of a competition with my sister, if I can say it like that, because I remember she was just 2 years younger than me. She was 5 at the time, and we had each been given a gift from our aunt of $100. And as a 7-year-old, originally I blew it. I went and bought stuff, but she was 5. She didn't really want for anything. And I remember my mom a few months later said, "Wow, she still has her $100." And I was like, "What?" And that kind of bothered me. He was like, "Well, I want $100." And so my dad's like, "Well, go earn it." And so I went and I started working with my neighbors, and it was almost a little bit of a competition at first, but then my parents started teaching us about finances. We actually played the Robert Kiyosaki rat race game, and Cash Flow for Kids. And he read me Rich Dad, Poor Dad. He did everything he could to teach me, because he said, "You know what, son, we're not in a good place financially now, but we will be. And so if you do this now, you'll always be rich." And so I just started living that. I started working. I was lucky my parents provided for my basic needs. If I wanted something extra, I had to buy it, but I was taken care of. And so that allowed me the opportunity to be able to be a saver and an investor. And I just kept going with that. And what I realized is I got just as much satisfaction by actually going to the store and purchasing these silver coins, if not more satisfaction, than I did going and purchasing toys. And as I just watched it grow, I went from, a few to now I have a chest full of it. And now it's like my dad is getting mad at me because it's like I filled up his safe with silver coins. He's like, "Okay, this isn't going to work out anymore. You got to keep it in the room."
So you turned it kind of into a pirate game.
Yeah, it was a game. And I think I still kind of get that. I get so much satisfaction from just watching wealth grow. It's almost like I'm playing it right. I'm doing it right. It's not necessarily the money. It's the satisfaction from, wow, I'm making something grow. I'm growing something. I'm bettering myself. And then it's just a self-reinforcing cycle almost. And I think it's like that for a lot of people.
So for the sake of the listeners, I just want to maybe point out that there was probably for all of us an event that happened that either decided that we are going to become consumers or we're going to become investors. And you made a decision to become an investor, to collect, to grow, to repopulate,
Yes.
and to be competitive. Because a lot of people don't know how they motivate themselves. And so you were catalyzed by this desire of competition, to compare, to compete, to conspire, to achieve more. I love that. And then you went out and did it with something you loved. But you mentioned at the top of the call that you've always been an analyst and you're very patient. I'd like to dig into that a little bit and get your perception on how important is that for you as in your identity quadrant?
How important is that for me in my identity quadrant?
As an investor.
As an investor, I think that's very important for me because, Rock, that's how I'm good at investing. I mean, you need to be able to analyze, because you need to be able to make those decisions, and the right decisions, and look at fact and say, okay, you know what? For example, right now, Federal Reserve printing plus governmental stimulus policy in huge dollar figures, we're talking trillions, typically by past measures results in inflationary pressures. And to be able to look at that and say, okay, look, these cycles take years to play out. What's the best move to make now based on that analysis? And then you place your trades and you make your investment and you have your plan, and then you have to wait. And I think that's the mistake most people make. We kind of have this like day trading culture going on now where it's like, I need to make 200% today. And if you don't, I'm done. And and what ends up happening is you lose 200% that day, and now you owe money to your brokerage. And so the ability to analyze and then decide what's best, but also the patience to execute it and to give it time to run out. When I'm making these investments, I'm typically looking 1, 2, 3 years down the line. That's what I want to be in line with. I want to be on the right side of a long-term bull market. Because as long as I'm on the right side of something going long term, I know I'm going to win. Anything can happen this week. I mean, who knows? Who knows? But as long as I'm on the right side of something that's going long term, even with a little bit of leverage, typically it's going to play out. But that requires patience. I may not see my results here for months, and for a lot of people, that's hard to do. They're checking their accounts every day. So that's why it's been so important.
So I've got a bunch of questions for you. I invested in the stock market. Last year was my best year ever. This year I did incredibly well. I think everybody that was in the market did well. I got lucky with cryptocurrency. I'm part of a group that convinced me to buy a coin that you might have heard of called Doge. But I bought it 3 years ago or 2.5 years ago at 0.003 cents.
Wow.
So I'm one of those people that, for your point, is patience, have enough dogs in the race. One of them is going to eventually step up and just lap the field. But at the time of this recording, we are in a very interesting time, because I really thought, like you thought, that inflation was going to start kicking in. I thought there was going to be a high level of repossessions in the stock, in real estate coming up.
Yeah.
And I pulled all my money out of the market in about a month ago, because I just felt like it's toppy. I had an incredible run, and I'm just not going to be too greedy. And so what are your thoughts at this point in time based on your experience? And then I want to ask you a follow-up question to who invests with you and where you invest.
Sure. Well, this is really interesting, because a lot of investing, to kind of touch on what you've done, is personal and individual. You did what you felt was best for you, and that's what made you comfortable. And you always need to be in line with what we call our sleeping level. And for you, you were uncomfortable. You felt like, hey, I've made a lot of money. I'm anxious about what's going on now. Had you stayed invested, you'd still be thinking about it. You'd still be anxious about it. So I think you made a good move, because you stopped yourself from being an emotional investor. So allow yourself some time to decompress. As far as inflationary pressures and where I think we're at now, these things take years to play out, and they take a lot of time to materialize. But I think we're starting to see the early stages of this cycle. I mean, with food prices, everybody's heard of what lumber's been doing. If you check the gold markets are starting to pop off again, and same with silver. So commodities prices are going crazy. And what you typically see in the early stages of an inflationary cycle is it's almost like the market's on drugs, because it seems like everyone is making money no matter where they put money. And that's great. I'm glad everybody's making money who's investing, and I'm glad that every single investment is going up, but that's not normal. And what happens is it becomes normalized. And so you have a lot of people that just the moment they get any money, they buy, and they start buying on leverage, and which further, I guess, progresses the inflationary cycle, because it's just more buying, more pushing of prices up, and everybody's still getting rich. And then eventually what you start seeing is that leverage, which is typically variable rates, interest rates start ticking up. And now these people can know, who are, usually like, oh yeah, we'll just keep buying, we'll refinance. It's like, well, the opportunity to refinance is no longer there.